Now, passengers on Singapore Airlines, Silkair and Scoot flights departing from Indonesia, Malaysia and Thailand can now transit through Changi Airport.
From Indonesia, the departure cities are Medan, Jakarta and Surabaya. From Malaysia, it's Penang, Ipoh, Kuala Lumpur and Kuching. Now from Thailand, it's just Bangkok. These locations add to a growing list of countries and cities approved for transit flights through Singapore.
Around the region, the SIA Group had earlier received approval to fly transit travellers from Cambodia and Vietnam. Along with Indonesia, Malaysia and Thailand, these Southeast Asian destinations were major transit markets for SIA before the pandemic. Other approved countries include China, Japan and the UK.
Meanwhile, the aviation industry is calling on countries to accept a negative COVID-19 test within 48 hours of travel as an alternative to quarantines. Airports and airlines are asking the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is a United Nations task force, to consider making that recommendation when it meets later today to review guidelines for international travel.
According to a Reuters report, the proposal from the Airports Council International and International Air Transport Association states that, quote, a test prior to departure could reduce the risk of importation by up to 90%, enabling air travel to be opened up between a large number of countries without a quarantine requirement. While the UN task force recommendations are voluntary, the guidelines are typically adopted by all 193 member countries.
We are joined by journalist Toh Ting Wei to discuss this further. Ting Wei, the resumption of transit flights through Singapore from the approved countries is a welcome move. How does this benefit our national carrier, Singapore Airlines Group, Changi Airport, or even our aviation sector in general?
I think for Singapore Airlines and Changi Airport, the obvious answer is that they will get more passengers in the short term. So, because like, for example, with this approval of transit flights from Vietnam, someone who is living in Vietnam and who wants to travel to maybe Sydney in Australia can take a SIA flight to transit in Singapore. So in that sense, it opens up a bit more markets. But when you look at it in the bigger picture, it's actually kind of a better than nothing situation. Like there are more passengers for both Changi Airport and SIA, but the number is not that significant. To put it into context, for last year, say for transit passengers, even like when air travel was okay and there was no COVID, it only made up about 1/3 of Changi Airport's total traffic. And now the numbers, even as Singapore starts to slowly approve the more transit passengers to come in, the number is still already a small fraction of what it used to be.
Airlines and airports are also pushing for countries to accept a negative COVID-19 test within 48 hours of travel as an alternative to quarantines. I can imagine this is a very concerted, coordinated effort if it comes to pass among countries. For example, Singapore's stay-home notice regulations differ from what other countries have in place. So, Ting Wei, what are some considerations you think for this plan to work?
Several considerations. So regarding the call for to replace the quarantine requirements and stuff, it has been ongoing for some time, especially from industry groups like the International Air Transport Association. And also the International Civil Aviation Organization has also called for countries to coordinate their responses. But it's a lot easier said than done because, for example, the suggestion about the testing 48 hours before departure, when you look at the incubation period of COVID-19, is 14 days. So when you take the test 2 days before and you fly over, there's really a lot of room for the thing to fail in the sense that you can come into the country with the COVID virus. So that's the health consideration is the main thing. And when you look at it, I guess like other things that the countries need to consider is that it's important for them to be at the same stage of the COVID-19 infections, in the sense that, let's say if a country has controlled the situation quite well and another country is still battling a lot of infections, and chances are when you get someone coming from that country, you have a high rate of infection, then obviously the partnerships can't work. So that's that.
And on that note, what challenges do you foresee then arising from this scheme?
I think one of the key things, actually maybe the key thing will be for whether travelers still want to travel. because I think like most of us, we do miss travel after so long of not going out. But when you look at the bigger picture, there's also a lot of things that will stop you from traveling. So for example, if you go with the current green lane arrangements with Malaysia, you have to take a COVID test there, and then after that, you come to Singapore, you come to Singapore, you take another COVID test. So, and these COVID tests are not cheap, like maybe around $200. So even, so that's the cost consideration for this. So you are just adding like $400, $500 to your travel costs, and then you also have to stay somewhere to wait for the results. And also, I mean, there's the risk of bringing the virus back to someone you are concerned about, especially maybe the more vulnerable people, like the older people. And then when you look at it, like for example, in Singapore's case, the government has said like if you are out traveling, and you come back, have to pay for your own medical costs for if you get COVID. So I think that's another big concern for many people. So I think even if you open up the skies at the moment, like no matter, assuming it's a big if that all the airports, governments, and after relevant authorities worldwide can work out a feasible kind of framework for air travel to continue. But then it's a big if whether passengers still want or still can travel, even if like this is in place.
Well, thank you so much, Toh Ting Wei, for coming on to the show to speak with us. We were speaking to journalist Toh Ting Wei.